Hi everyone. This is going to be the very last panel session on the intersection of climate and nuclear justice, empowering youth for change. My name is Miyuki Horiguchi, and I will be moderating this session. I'm currently based in Tokyo, Japan, and working for the Office of Peace and Global Issues at the Soka Gakkai International. I also serve as a partnership coordinator of the Youth for TPNW, which is a global network of young professionals working for nuclear abolition. This panel aims to explore the relationship between anti-nuclear and climate change activism, as well as the role of young people in bringing about change and a better world. As some of the previous speakers shared, this year's doomsday clock stands at 89 seconds to midnight, closest ever to human extinction. Two of the main factors are the threat of nuclear weapons and the climate crisis. As youth, these are not something far removed from our daily lives, but very critical challenges for us and the generations to come. In the lead-up to the Summit of the Future held last September, SGI and other youth-focused organizations co-organized the Future Action Festival to mobilize young people throughout Japan in tackling the nuclear threat and the climate crisis. Towards this festival, we conducted the youth awareness survey targeting those aged from their teens to 40s, and approximately 120,000 participated in this survey. In fact, more than half of the respondents answered that they don't have hope for their future. However, at the same time, about half of the respondents also answered that they are willing to contribute to their society. I myself, as a youth, I believe there is so much wisdom that each individual in our generation can learn from each other and bring together from all different fields. We are now at the crucial crossroads whether we can create a society where young people can choose hope for their future. In the Krieger and Ikeda dialogue, Dr. Krieger says, I quote, "I would like young people to join hands across borders and to insist that their elders do so too, in order to end our present insanity. In short, I would like young people to choose hope." Unquote. Then President Ikeda replies, I quote, "The hallmark of youth is optimism and high idealism. The young are constantly challenged to open the door to new eras. Hope is another name for youth." Unquote. During this session, I truly hope that we can envision our peaceful and sustainable future together and deepen our determination for our shared goal. Now, please allow me to introduce our esteemed speakers for this session. First, Dr. Robert Dodge is a family physician practicing in Ventura, California. He is the co-chair of the Social Security Committee of Physicians for Social Responsibility, USA. He is the president of PSR Los Angeles. Dr. Dodge played an active role in the successful passage of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons and helped organize the U.S. Back from the Brink campaign, which endorses the treaty and calls for specific steps to lower the risk of nuclear war. Also, Dr. Dodge is in his 37th year editing the U.S. Nuclear Weapons Community Cost Project that calculates local communities' cost of the nuclear complex. And next, Anduin DeVos. Anduin DeVos is the campaign director at Nuclear Ban US, where she coordinates with the Warheads to Windmills Coalition calling for the abolition of nuclear weapons and the transition of those wasted human and financial resources to addressing the climate crisis. And the third speaker is Kenneth Chiu. Kenneth Chiu serves as the communications and media coordinator at the Nuclear Age Peace Foundation. Kenneth played a pivotal role in launching Reverse the Trend, Save Our Planet, Save Our People, Save Our Planet in January 2021, an initiative aimed at raising awareness among global youth about the adverse effects of nuclear weapons and climate change, particularly on marginalized communities. Through his work, Kenneth continues to advocate for a nuclear-free world, emphasizing the importance of youth engagement and education in achieving sustainable peace. And our last speaker is Viktoria Lokh. Viktoria Lokh is currently a third-year undergraduate student at Soka University of America studying international studies. She is a student assistant at the Soka Institute for Global Solutions and has assisted in organizing the Nuclear Politics Summer Program, the Global Citizenship Education Conference, and the Peace and Reconciliation in East Asia Symposium. Her goal is to support youth-led initiatives and promote progress in nuclear disarmament through positive contributions in education and media. Now, I would like to hear from each of the panelists about their perspectives and ideas on the intersection of nuclear weapons and climate crisis, and how young people can choose hope for their own society and future. So first, our speaker is Dr. Dutch. You have been engaging with many youth members of your organization. What is your belief or motivation in involving more young physicians in this movement, and what is their role as young professionals in preventing nuclear war and climate catastrophe? Floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I want to thank the Nuclear Age Peace Foundation, Soka Gakkai, Ivana for asking me to come and participate. I'm very excited and honored and flattered to be on a youth panel again. So I think that's appropriate. So this morning, one of my heroes, Professor Falk, was asking, well, what is hope, or is this wishful thinking? And I'm reminded of the quote of another one of my heroes, Václav Havel, who said, hope is not the conviction that something will turn out right, but the certainty that something makes sense irrespective of how it turns out. Another hero, Margaret Mead, said, who, again, never doubt that a small group of individuals can make a dramatic change, because ultimately that is how it has always happened. So we are a small but mighty group and growing group. We're talking about the intersection of climate and nuclear justice. And I want to start with hope, because I give these talks a lot, and people say, well, how do you do that? Aren't you discouraged? What gives you hope? So first of all, what gives me hope is these citizens right here, this next generation, and so much of Soka Gakkai, who I've been able to meet with around the country, around the state, and around the world. It is a remarkable organization, and I thank each and every one of you. Last week, I was at the 3MSP meeting, and again, when you look at ICANN, it's an incredibly youth-focused, young people organization movement that is really moving ahead. And it's been my experience, again, Dr. Falk last night he talked about awakening. And it is my experience that whether you are young or old alike, when you are awakened and you're aware of this, okay, people will say, my gosh, I was unaware. How did this happen? What can I do? Where do we need to go? And so I call it the awareness gap. Our role is to make people aware. And when they are aware, I tend to find they act. Next generation students and adults have been aware of the climate crisis forever, and they're out there. This is my world. This is, again, I live in Ojai, the Shangri-La just south of here. And I'm just 15 minutes from above the greatest surf spot in the continental United States in Ventura. And so I talk to young people, say their surf spot is getting fouled up because of climate change, because of wave change, et cetera. So they can make the connection between what is important, what is critical to them, and the world around them. So a lot of the topic here today is on justice, and we all know what means nuclear and climate justice. But there is no justice when communities are impacted unequally, and when the very existence of all that we care about and all that we have is threatened. There can be no justice therein. So I frequently speak about the interconnection about nuclear weapons and climate. And I tell people, if you're concerned about climate change and you're not concerned about nuclear weapons, or vice versa, you're concerned about nuclear weapons and you're not concerned about climate, you don't get it. They are intricately connected. They are both existential threats and therefore, as a physician, health threats. They're both real and present dangers, and we must act, and we all have a responsibility to act. Related to public health threats, my dear friend and colleague, Dr. Hara, spoke last night about some of the effects of nuclear explosion, nuclear war. The universal injury in a nuclear explosion is a burns and trauma. The unique effect is the effect of radiation. Okay, so we're all familiar with that, but it's really the burns which ultimately are the universal injury, and also in a big enough scaled conflict cause the climate change that basically sets us all to be doomed in a matter of days and weeks and years. Dr. Hara spoke about strontium-90. So strontium-90 is not a naturally occurring radioisotope. It only occurs with nuclear explosions. And so physicians in the United States and the former Soviet Union in the early 60s were identifying strontium-90, which to the body looks like calcium. It's taken up with calcium in baby human teeth and bones, where it then goes on and emits for years to come, causing increased risk of cancer, primarily leukemias and blood-borne cancers. Most radioisotopes are taken into the body and recognized as some life-giving element. Cesium looks like potassium, taken up in every single organ, every living thing, including plants, which then gets into the food chain. Iodine, taken up to the thyroid, where it promotes thyroid cancer. And actually, plutonium-239 is the most hazardous item on the planet. A fraction, millionth of an ounce, will cause universally 100% cancer. So it is the most dangerous one we have. We're all familiar with half-lives, how long it takes for an element to become half as potent, okay? And so, for example, cesium and strontium-90, 30 years roughly. Plutonium, 24,000 years. But another area that those of us in health look at is we call it the hazardous life. The hazardous life is actually 20 half-lives. So to put that in perspective, for strontium-90 and cesium, that's some 600 years, okay? For plutonium, it's 500,000 years. So when we're talking about having safe repositories for nuclear waste, small modular reactors, you need to think death. You need to think end of life. You know, nuclear power is the cover story for nuclear weapons. They exist and coexist together, and they're equally interdependent. We haven't done a good job as civilization of storing something for 1,000 years, let alone 500,000 years. I want to also relate it to health things. You know, we've done studies looking at what if a suitcase bomb, you know, for years we talked about the risk of, quote unquote, a terrorist threat, somebody bringing a small suitcase-sized bomb. This is a bomb about the size of a softball into inner city LA and exploding at LA City Hall at noontime. Well, there'd be tens of thousands of casualties, but more importantly, there'd be tens of thousands of critical burns. Now, I did part of my training in a burn unit. These are where you have one-on-one nursing around the clock, 24/7. Nobody leaves the bedside. These beds, well, there'd be tens of thousands for a suitcase bomb in Los Angeles. And that, again, there are 1,800 burn beds in the United States, okay? There is no adequate response. There is no adequate response. Related, shifting to climate change and the connection, climate change affects every single organ system of the human body and every single medical specialty. The connection, as we look further between the two, with ongoing climate change and extreme weather conditions, we see decreased availability and access to critical natural resources. We see decreased food, causing food insecurity. We see ecosystems and disruption, changing weather patterns, causing floods, droughts, and vector changes where insects fly and go. We see the spreading of diseases such as cholera and dysentery, hantavirus. Again, we see Zika virus. We see West Nile virus. All these things are changing, evolving due to climate change. Over 58% of all human infectious disease pathogens are increased and aggravated by climate change. Over 58%. These conditions, again, can result in mass migration, as we saw in Syria in the last century, which resulted in the largest mass migration in human history and causes one of the greatest humanitarian crises. It also brought the United States and Russia's militaries into direct conflict, flying sorties at each other, two nuclear-armed nations flying their militaries against each other. What if that had turned into a larger conflict? Again, we would have seen life cease as we know it. Well, As physicians and scientists and health practitioners, we have a unique voice. We have a voice that people listen to. And again, we have both a role and a responsibility to speak out. We are first responders. You know, I'm on a list. If something happens in my community of Ventura, where I'm supposed to report, what I'm supposed to do, et cetera. Again, there is no response to a nuclear attack. We are also responsible as first responders. We had the recent terrible fire in Los Angeles. Devastation, massive amounts. Fortunately, not a lot of life lost, but again, as first responders, well, that massive fire, the fires we saw in Maui a few years back, pale in comparison by even a small nuclear explosion. Again, no adequate response. So, as with all again, incurable public health threats, from in the 1800s, tuberculosis, to AIDS in its early years, HIV. Again, we found that what we cannot cure, we must prevent. Okay? And that's been the physician motto forever. We must prevent what we cannot cure. We have a responsibility as health practitioners to be aware, to inform, and to educate our communities. Organized medicine in the United States has not always been a very progressive and liberal group. I'm proud to say I'm not a member of the AMA or any of them. But at any rate, that said, in 2024, they said that the American Red Cross encouraged the United States and other nuclear nations to sign the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. And in the year before, they said, and all physicians must learn about this. They must educate their patients, their communities, their elected officials, and work to abolish nuclear weapons, move our weapons off hair trigger alert, end sole authority, defund the massive rebuild. So that was the American Medical Association in 2023. They also, over 200 medical journals spoke out on the health consequences of climate change and said it is our responsibility to speak up, to educate, and to make the connection. The same with nuclear weapons. Over 100 medical journals internationally. This was the largest combined editorial response in medical history. Again, so they get it. Again, I'm going to leave you, when we know about this information, when you know, when I know, we can't do nothing. We all have to do something. We all have a role to play. It's not necessarily a big role or a small role. It is your role. So you all must do that. And my feeling, when I work with young students and young people, again, I find that when they get it, they understand. My personal experience in the last several years, my co-president of Physicians for Social Responsibility is a 33-year-old physical therapist, Iranian. I met when she was 20. She, with the nuclear age, at the ICANN meeting several years ago, and so she is now my co-president. I've also worked with, I'm going to block my mind, excuse me, I'm getting ahead of myself. Talia Wilcox, who was, again, with Reverse the Trend, and now she's working very heavily with Back from the Brink. Again, youth organizations. There is Reverse the Trend, which is a wonderful movement of the Nuclear Age Peace Foundation. Our Back from the Brink program has a group called Students for Nuclear Disarmament, which is getting campuses across the nation, developing, again, calling for all components of the Nuclear Abolition Treaty. As a professional physician, we also have, again, the Young Emerging Leaders Campaign, getting doctors involved. So again, I'm going to close and say, again, potentially the military gets this more than anybody else. You may be aware of retired General Anthony Zinni, who's speaking on climate change, and he was the former head of the Central Command, okay, and said, we will pay for climate change one way or another. We will pay for it now to reduce greenhouse gases, and we'll have an economic hit of some kind. Or we will pay the price later in military lives, and that will involve human lives. The choice is ours. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dodge, for sharing the real threats of nuclear weapons and also climate change from the scientific perspectives. And so also, thank you so much for your strong encouragement for us, especially for young people. Thank you so much. So next speaker is going to be Anduin. As a campaign coordinator, you have been at the front line of the Warheads to Windmills coalition campaign to pressure banks and institutions that profit from investing in nuclear weapons and fossil fuels. In Japan, we saw a little bit progress in divestment of major banks a few years ago, but what are the challenges and the progress in the States for his years? Thank you.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Miyuki. And thank you, Dr. Dodge, for talking a lot about what I was planning on talking about with the connections with the climate crisis. I think we're on the same wavelength there. Also, I want to thank the Nuclear Age Peace Foundation and Soka Gakkai for putting this together and for inviting me to speak. I'm really, truly honored to be here, especially at an event framed around hope. I think that that's a real challenge, a challenging line, especially in this field when we're talking about huge existential threats, hope versus fear, and what is a motivator. And I think that having that balance of hope is really important. So the first thing most people ask young people in this field, and I've gotten it already 20 times today, is how did you get involved in this? How did you come to this? And obviously that's a really important question. Like, that's what we're trying to get at. We want more young people engaged, so we need to figure out the answer to that. And as Bob was saying again, there's this moment of realization that they have, where they're not aware of this, and then there's this like chance awareness moment, and our job is to increase those chances. So I first started working with the Warheads to Windmills Coalition. I came to it as a person with a lot of climate anxiety, and I really had no idea about nuclear weapons. I knew them as this existential abstract threat that I was scared of, but because of this narrative, this pervasive propaganda narrative, especially in the United States, they're not something that you think that you can do anything about, so they're not really something you question or put a lot of energy into thinking about the everyday person outside of this space. So I came to Warheads to Windmills through this climate anxiety lens, and then I had my awareness moment about nuclear weapons, and I've just been so dedicated to them since, because it's an insane problem. It's just absurd. But they have this visibility problem, right? The climate crisis does not have this visibility problem. We see these threats. We see in California the fires. It's something you can feel, the climate crisis. So, and what I've learned coming into this space is that nuclear weapons are a climate crisis as well. And I think there's a real opportunity in organizing, when you look at it through that lens, when you frame it in that way, nuclear weapons are a climate crisis, because the climate crisis is such a tangible threat that a lot of people are mobilized around. And if we're trying to mobilize people around nuclear weapons, framing it as a climate crisis directly, so it's directly part of their organizing as well, is I think, there's strong potential and opportunity in there. So I think that's what we're trying to do with the Warheads to Windmills Coalition, especially. And just to recover a little bit of the ground that Dr. Dodge was saying, so these two existential threats, right, they're basically competing to end the world. There's the climate crisis, slow rolling the process, we're on this slow march, and then nuclear weapons, as Annie talks about, could end the world as we know it in the matter of minutes. So they're competing, but they're also deeply connected and exacerbating each other. As the climate crisis worsens and people lose their homes and their comfort and their resources, global tensions exacerbate, and the likelihood of a nuclear attack or conflict increases. There's also the life cycle of nuclear weapons and the associated militarism with them, from uranium mining, construction, waste, testing, terrible environmental consequences associated with these issues. And then, of course, the climate crisis is adding more risk to nuclear weapons issues, with rising sea levels threatening nuclear waste containment, which is a huge issue that I think we're going to see a lot more of coming up. And then, and this is key, all of the resources that the climate desperately needs that are being diverted instead towards these nuclear weapons works. We know trillions, billions, and trillions of dollars around the world are getting put into nuclear weapons, including our education and our great engineering minds are going into this nuclear weapons work when we really need them to be addressing the climate crisis. I want to shout out what Melissa was saying yesterday. Nuclear weapons of the global challenges is a pretty solvable one. Like, we could just do it. If we got along and could do it, we could do it. But the climate crisis is not that simple at all. It's a very complicated issue. We're going to need so much money, so much research, all the resources. It's going to take a lot to do that, and we're certainly not going to be able to accomplish that if instead we're pointing weapons at each other, putting all of our resources into building the biggest arsenals. And also, the biggest polluters are the ones with the nuclear weapons arsenals. So we really need this global cooperation to solve the climate crisis, but right now we're pointing more and more weapons at each other. Imagine what we could do if that wasn't our priority as a world. So there's nuclear weapons are a climate crisis, and those are just a few of the connections between them. There's obviously nuclear winter is a huge climate crisis. There's so many other layers that we could dig into, but that's just some of the framing when you're trying to link with the climate movement, which has this so much organization and forgetting the word that I'm thinking. Anyway, momentum. There we go. So much momentum with the climate movement. If you frame the nuclear weapons as a climate crisis, it's a way to engage with them on those spaces. And that brings me to resource conversion, which is how I like to see nuclear weapon abolition can be part of the climate solution. Because if we can transport all of those resources that are currently going into nuclear weapons to addressing the climate crisis, there's a ton of resources that are just being wasted on these things that can never be used, right? Only in apocalyptic scenarios. And we really, if we can change our priorities and address the climate crisis instead, that's where we need to go. So that's, sorry. So that's the framing. That's this reframing nuclear weapons. Not when you're talking, it's tricky because obviously these are a huge humanitarian problem. But when you're talking to climate activists, they're so focused. If you talk to them about the humanitarian threat, they're like, oh, that's a peace activist's problem. That's not ours. So if you frame it as a climate issue and then potentially their abolition as a climate solution, that's a way to engage with them on that. And I want to talk about hope and solutions in the spirit of this event. So I want to talk about, and I think we really need to acknowledge the power of the industry, which has been acknowledged today, especially the military-industrial complex is really driving this war machine and blocking all of our civil society initiatives. They're really in charge at the realm, unfortunately, of the decisions here. So we really need to figure out a way to address the industry and stop them from shaping and maintaining this narrative that we need nuclear weapons, that they're a deterrent, that they're protecting us. We need to stop the industry because they're controlling that narrative. And so if we look into actions we can take against the industry, I want to talk about divestment, which is not like a super exciting thing to talk about, but it also links back to the climate movement. The fossil fuel industry has divested over $40 trillion from fossil fuels. The climate movement has divested over $40 trillion from the fossil fuel industry, which is a huge amount of money. But that didn't happen out of nowhere. That came from the hard work of scientists and activists changing the norm around fossil fuels and creating this very important stigma that the burning of fossil fuels is threatening all life on Earth and a dirty, bad business that we don't want to be involved in. And that took a lot of work and action. So I have hope of rebuilding that stigma for nuclear weapons. Unfortunately, it has diminished, especially in this younger generation, which hasn't seen the Cold War, which hasn't seen these firsthand accounts. We need to rebuild that stigma, which most of the world already does recognize. But I have hope that we can rebuild that stigma of nuclear weapons. I have hope that we can grow this movement intersectionally, connect with the climate crisis movement and other humanitarian threat movements to build a really strong intersectional and sustainable movement. And I have hope that together with that movement and with the stigma around nuclear weapons, we can take the power away from these companies that are controlling the narrative and allow the voice of peace to shine through. So divestment work is something that a lot of people don't know how to engage in, but it is something that you can do with your towns can do divestment, your businesses, your schools, your faith communities. You can all take a stand with your money to move it out of nuclear weapons companies. And also another connection with the climate, I want to flag the big financiers of nuclear weapons, the big banks, are also the ones financing the climate crisis and financing the fossil fuel industry. So it's a massively intersectional movement, and I think we're not going to be able to solve one of these problems without solving the other. And so we just need to keep building the stigma around fossil fuels and nuclear weapons and keep building the connections between the movements. And I do have hope that we can get there.
Thank you so much, Anduin, for sharing a clear framing of the two issues and also the intersections of the two issues. Also, yeah, thank you so much for sharing what we can do as young people and also rebuilding the stigma against nuclear weapons. Thank you so much. So our next speaker is Kenneth. You are one of the members who took the lead in launching the Reverse the Trend RTT, which focuses on the intersection of nuclear weapons and the climate crisis. I also see so many students and young people attending the international conferences, including TPNW, TMSB. What are the RTT's activities and their aims? And also, how do you see the role of young people in this nuclear disarmament field? For his years. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kenneth Chiu, and I am the Communications and Media Coordinator for the Nuclear Age Peace Foundation. I wanted to kind of start with how I got involved with nuclear disarmament. It was through Christian with Reverse the Trend, the youth initiative of the Nuclear Age Peace Foundation. This was in January of 2021. I was a sophomore in college looking for an internship. And the thing that drew me in was it said something United Nations. So nothing to do with nuclear disarmament, but I was interested in the work, and little did I know 4 years later I'd still be here working in this field, and for many more years to come. What's special about January 2021 is that coincided with the entry into force of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. So it was a time of renewed hope and also new hope in aligning with the theme of this conference. So I felt very fortunate to join the field at a time where things seem to be turning around. And even today, we are trying to build off that momentum of the TPNW. And what really inspired me to stay in the field was not only joining as an intern with Christian, but also attending the first meeting of states parties in Vienna in the summer of 2022. And I want to emphasize that what was so special about that meeting wasn't necessarily the meeting itself, but meeting so many like-minded people who were both my age and also experts in the field who are older and more experienced and who could speak to kind of the ideologies and kind of the facts behind the matter as well. And I want to share an anecdote from a side event that I participated in with the help of Christian, of course, bringing youth voices under Reverse the Trend into spaces such as the United Nations. This was a side event with the governor of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, as well as about 2-3 other experts at the United Nations in New York for the Non-Proliferation Treaty. And first of all, I was very surprised to be a young person sitting in that room as we were doing introductions with everyone. As you know, the governors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki were there, and then the other introductions were, I've been in this field for 10 years. And I was like, wow, that's a long time. And then the next person was like, yeah, maybe 15 years. And then the next person was, I've been in this field since like the middle of the Cold War. And I was like, I'm a third-year college student, but I do believe that I have something important to contribute to this conversation. I didn't say that out loud, but that's what I knew. That's what I thought deep down, and I feel like that is one of the most important parts of being a youth in these very expert-dominated fields, is that with the help of people, organizations, letting young people know that their voices are important. And you also see as I've attended more conferences, I see that all these experts, diplomats, professors really do value the voices of young people because they provide a fresh take on these issues. Young people are more likely to be bold, and their opinions are more, for better or worse, grounded in common sense. So it's not something that's filtered through like years of research or just like knowledge. So that's why I think that college students and even high school students have very valuable takes on these events. And at this same side event, it was a panel on the humanitarian consequences of nuclear weapons, and then also talking about victims of nuclear testing, or what we call so-called testing, and then also the victims of the actual bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And one of the questions that came up after the panel concluded came from a French diplomat who asked, well, we know that nuclear weapons are bad, but what about the reality that we are in? Nuclear weapons are already here. And implicitly, this diplomat implied that the panel, it was a very targeted question that was like, I would say pretty offensive, but the question implied that everyone on the panel was naive to think that we could suggest that there could be a world without nuclear weapons and that abolishing them was something that was like a fantasy. And my response to that question was that deterrence is just a theory. That's not something that's grounded in facts, but what is grounded in facts is that people from affected communities of nuclear testing and use, that is real. You ask the people of Japan, the people of the Pacific, the people of the Southwest U.S., and so many more. Like those are facts that you can't reject, and at the same time, they point to deterrence as something that they hide behind. So with that, yeah, going on that says that the idea is that young people can speak out against these institutions and provide a valuable voice. And I didn't realize that until it happened to me myself. And it wasn't something that I planned on. This was a follow-up question on the panel, and I saw an opportunity and spoke on it and didn't really realize the impact until after the panel finished. So I'll conclude my remarks by saying that one of the main steps in furthering the cause of nuclear disarmament, especially in countries that are hostile to disarmament, such as the U.S., is to stigmatize the idea of these weapons as protecting people. If we, the people, don't believe nuclear weapons are a threat to humanity, then elimination remains a fantasy. And this is very specific to, like I said, countries hostile to nuclear disarmament, because in other countries, people are convinced, and the path to disarmament is slightly different. But in the US itself, a lot of people don't even think of nuclear weapons as something bad. It's just something as like another military weapon, which is a myth that we have to dispel. Thank you.
Thank you, Kenneth, for openly sharing your experience and also encouraging us young people that we have something to contribute to this issue. Thank you so much. So last speaker is going to be Viktoria Lokh. In the Krieger and Ikeda dialogue, they mentioned the importance of education to nurture global citizens who can courageously take actions for those who are suffering the most. Studying at the Soka University of America, which truly upholds and embodies such education, what is your understanding of founder Daisaku Ikeda's vision of global citizenship, and what is your experience? Please take the floor, Vicky.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can everyone hear me well? Okay, so how many people have heard of the term global citizenship education? See one. Okay, around like half or like more of the room. So, I come from Estonia. I'm Estonian, and I'm an international student here. So I spent 16 years of my life in an Estonian public school, and I knew nothing about GC, Global Citizenship Education. So I would like to share a little bit of my experience on how I came to that. So when I turned 16, I kind of realized that I was tired of the general education system in Estonia, and I wanted to switch it up. I wanted to hear a diverse range of ideas. I wanted to meet new people. I wanted to travel. So I applied for a study abroad program, but I got rejected. So I went Googling and I found Think Global School, which is an international traveling high school, project-based in New York. And I joined that school. And for my 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, I spent it traveling around the world. And I learned by interacting with the communities and actually learning history from the places where these historic events had happened. For example, I learned about reconciliation by visiting the place where the Srebrenica genocide took place in Bosnia and Herzegovina, or I went on a leadership hike for 2 weeks in Patagonia, or I also met with Aboriginal peoples in Australia, and that's all thanks to this different kind of thinking in education. And when time came for me to choose a college, I had no idea where I could find this type of education once again. But then I found Soka University of America one day on Instagram, and yeah, so thanks to social media, I've discovered all of these great opportunities. And there I discovered the liberal arts class, that SUA has these liberal arts classes and the learning clusters, and also our core values of courage, wisdom, and compassion, as well as the diversity of its student body, which most of my friends in my university are international, and also the generous financial aid, because for my traveling high school too, I got a full scholarship, and for Soka too, I have a really great scholarship, so I could afford it. And also the mission of fostering a steady stream of global citizens committed to living a contributive life. And when I heard the term global citizen, I was like, yeah, of course I want to be a global citizen. So I applied to Soka and I got in, yay. And as I am standing here today, I have so many things to be grateful for. Thanks to Soka, I have studied immigration in Miami, Spanish in Barcelona, Spain. Also, I went to a United Nations study tour in New York. And last summer, thanks to me participating in a Business to Bridges club, I also got to have an internship at a law firm in San Francisco. And besides all of these opportunities that this education has given me, I have also made friends from countries that I barely knew of. And I feel like I have become closer to the ideal student that Daisaku Ikeda envisioned when he created this university. And also as a junior at Soka, I have come to internalize this responsibility that we all have for creating a world of nonviolence. And nuclear weapons and climate change both threaten the foundations of human value, which is really, these topics are really important. And I really started to understand this connection at the Soka University of America's annual nuclear politics program, where I heard Ira Helfand's, I'm sure a lot of you know Ira Helfand's speech on the catastrophic effects of human war, of a nuclear war, sorry, and that a single detonation could cause really, really catastrophic humanitarian and environmental consequences. And even a small nuclear change could bring us to a nuclear winter, which in only a few months, it could drop the temperature by 6 degrees Celsius and cause like a mass famine worldwide. And that sounds really scary, doesn't it? And to me too, it sounded terrifying. So I feel like we need to make world leaders face the potential consequences to the existence of nuclear weapons. And both Dr. Ikeda and Dr. Krieger emphasized our shared humanity. And this is what we need to cultivate in people. And coming back to global citizenship education, I feel like it's a good way to build such strong footing for the prevention of these type of disasters, which is we have to educate people. And education and peace are not separate, but they're one and the same. So education can help us cultivate values and perspectives and commitments which are necessary for a more just and secure world. And this is the essence of Daisaku Ikeda's global citizenship education, which is also deeply embedded in our university. And at SUA, we combine peace, environmental, developmental, and human rights education, as they are all interconnected. They are not separate issues. And Ikeda often speaks of creative coexistence, which is the idea that we have to nurture and engage with the world, rather than treat it as an abstraction. And the same applies to nuclear disarmament. And we cannot simply leave this issue to history books or museums, but we have to actively engage in it, as it is a living struggle for the future of our humanity. And we all need to become global citizens. And then what does it mean to be a global citizen, you may ask? And for Ikeda, to be a global citizen doesn't mean abandoning your identity, but rather aligning it with a greater solidarity with the common humanity. And it would not exclude or divide, but rather unite everyone. And as a global citizen, you have a responsibility to the world. However, you do not need to give up your identity, but instead, you are encouraged to take your identity with you. And this is why SUA stands firm in its commitment to nuclear disarmament. And we are one of the few institutions that take such a clear and unwavering stance, and we do so because we recognize that peace isn't an ideal, but it is a responsibility. And I would like to quote Daisaku Ikeda. In his book, The Human Revolution, he wrote, "A great human revolution in just a single individual will help achieve a change in the destiny of a nation, and further will enable a change in the destiny of all humankind." And each of us here, whether a student, a professional, an activist, or an educator, has the power to contribute to this transformation towards positive peace. And we can all choose action over apathy, education over ignorance, and choose hope over cynicism. And together, we can step into a future where nuclear weapons aren't just reduced, but also abolished. Thank you.
Thank you, Vicky, for sharing your experience at Soka and also the importance of global citizenship education. And also, we can be like global citizens, and also our shared responsibility to these global challenges. Thank you so much. So now we will be moving on to our interactive discussion with all the panelists. So if you have any follow-up comments or questions, please raise your hand, or you can free to take a mic. Do you have any question? Okay. Now maybe I'd like to raise one question to either Anduin or Kenneth. I think both of you attended the TPNW 3MSB last week in New York. What was your impression in terms of youth engagement, and also what do you hope for the next review conference happening in 2026?
Hello. Hi. So last week I was very fortunate to attend the third meeting of states parties in New York. It was a 5-day conference, Monday through Friday. Sorry, can you repeat the question? The youth engagement at this conference was very high as usual, but something that really stood out to me was that on the first day, as the beginning of the plenary started, the plenary is the UN meeting, is that there were no seats left for people. People had to wait in line outside, which is very rare for the UN. Civil society usually does not engage as much. The TPNW is an exception to this, and a lot of that has to do with the emergence of strong groups in civil society, such as ICANN, and also with Reverse the Trend, NAPF's youth initiative. We brought over 50 or 60, not interns, 50 or 60 youth activists into the United Nations, and this is important in two ways. First is showing that civil society and that the new generation does actively care about this topic and is supportive of the TPNW. And also secondly is that after the conference is over, after this week is over, all these youth activists go home and people will start asking, oh, why were you at the UN? I saw all those pictures. And that's where you spread the advocacy, you spread the word about the existential threat that nuclear weapons have to this world, and also to go into more simple details of how that's achievable. And it's not just simple fear-mongering. And as for what I hope to see at the next review conference is this continued engagement of the youth, of bringing people in and then getting the message out. But also seeing more of an international presence. That's something I wish to see more, especially with the conference happening in New York. It's more difficult for people who aren't coming from Western countries or say Europe or the Americas to come to these conferences. Something I'd like to see more is a wider diversity of people so that there can be more cross-cultural dialogue and also some sharing of how this issue is addressed in different countries. And that's always something valuable.
Yeah, I'll speak to the youth engagement at the 3MSP as well. I just want to say, when I first got involved in the space, it was 3 months before the second meeting of states parties, and I had the opportunity to go to the second meeting of states parties with 3 months of experience under my belt, which is insane. But it was really shocking to see how youth-led this movement is internationally. And in that space, I feel like in the United States, my experience has been very different. The demographics that we see engaged in this is largely not youth. And so it's inspiring and it's very hopeful to see all of that engagement internationally. So that's my main takeaway, and it was incredible to see all of those brilliant young voices again speaking up and taking the space for themselves, taking the initiative to make a change and not shy away from it, because it can be intimidating in these rooms full of experts to be confident and assured of yourself, but it is a really important voice to have, and so it's incredible to see that happening and see that welcomed in this space, especially at the UN. Yeah, I think that's it.
I just want to speak. I was also there, and I was so impressed. I mean, again, ICANN is a youth movement, okay? So that's phenomenal. And again, Soka Gakkai. So throughout the entirety of the United Nations, it was young people there getting it, speaking out, demanding their future not be including nuclear weapons. So that's very inspiring. I was at a sidebar also on arts. So this morning we had Anduin DeVos speak about, today's young people don't typically read. They don't get their information through reading. They get it through maybe social media. This particular presentation had high school and college students from Atlanta, Georgia, and from Detroit, inner city kids speaking with art, with poetry, with with short movies, again, expressing the concern about nuclear weapons, the risks, and their desires for the future. So that was very engaging. I think this is only something that will continue to evolve as we go forward.
Thank you very much. So maybe following up the young people's engagement in this nuclear disarmament field, I would like to ask maybe Vicky. You have experienced many things, organizing conferences, also nuclear politics summer program. How do you engage with young people in your generation, also like future generations?
For in general, or
Yeah,
for just the
in
program?
general, also really mobilize young people. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I think at Nuclear Politics, what we've been trying to do is to make all of our, all parts of our program really interactive, and also to make sure that all of the participants will stay connected with each other even after the program. So not only do we educate, but we also connect people. We want to build a sustainable network of young people from all different areas of interest. For example, when we take in our applications, we don't only consider their background in nuclear politics, but we also consider like the impact of that they could have after, also on their communities and so on. For example, last year we had someone who was really into like theater and arts, and it was their first time learning about nuclear politics. And for them, it was really shocking to hear some of the facts, that they even had to like go and take breaks sometimes. Like they would just leave the class and be like, oh, I need some time for myself. So I know for some people that are not used to it, it can be really difficult, but we still try to accommodate our program for them and make it so that young people from all concentrations can come and learn together. Yeah, I think that.
Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you. Now I'd like to open the floor to the audience as well. If you have any questions, Christian.
Yes, I have a question. Probably this is geared towards Kenneth. I know at the pre-MSB, young people delivered statements during general exchange of views, universalization, and during the segment on gender. Could you discuss why it's important for young people to speak at these UN conferences? I know you talked about the side events, but if you could talk about the significance for them sharing their views in plenary sessions, that would be great.
Yep, I'm happy to talk on that. I think one of the most important things about giving youth speaking positions at these conferences is showing that their voice does matter. It's something I said before earlier in my remarks, but that people do listen to your voice. Countries and other organizations pay attention to what you have to say, and yeah, so that's the first point. And then the second point is instilling the confidence in the youth that their voice is on equal footing with everyone else in that room, if at the very least for that one moment. And I think that's something that also gives youth the confidence to know that their opinion is supported, not supported, but based in fact, and something that they can take home and also spread that same message with the same confidence that they had at the United Nations. So just giving youth the chance to show that their voice matters in a room where it matters is a great opportunity that I think is, yeah, it's just a great opportunity.
I see Marissa. If you'd like to, yeah.
First of all, I want to say, Victoria, when you spoke, I had chills. It was amazing to hear your experience. And I think, I'm a local from Santa Barbara, and I, had some connection with the Nuclear Age Peace Foundation. I was in college at USC 20 years ago. But I'm just really inspired that you went and experienced the suffering and the history of the world. And when I hear from Dr. Dodge and Anduin, when you're saying there aren't that many youth in America that seem that motivated. I know you have the Soka Gakkai, which is part of Soka University of America. Daisaku Ikeda, who's the founder, really had this idea of global citizenship. So that's happening there. And you guys are based in Aliso Viejo in Orange County. We're the rest of the country. So my question is, how can us, here, support the three, the Nuclear Age Peace Foundation, all your organizations? What can we do that's actionable to support the youth, to get the word out, whatever you may think? How can we support you, have more people like Victoria out there?
I think on a really basic level, the answer is just to talk about this in spaces where you probably wouldn't think to. Just really bring the conversation of nuclear weapons to as many areas as you can and tell more people about it. Like I was saying, it's my experience with how young people get engaged in this is they just have this random chance moment where they hear about it. Or they happen to be in a lecture where it's mentioned, they happen to see a job posting, it's by chance. So we need to increase those chances. Just talk about it more, get it out more. And I think that's my basic answer.
Again, the Nuclear Age Peace Foundation has a Reverse the Trend movement with Back from the Brink that I'm on the steering committee. We have a movement called Students for Nuclear Disarmament, which is a national movement. We're trying to get high schools and colleges across the nation. My goal is to get UC Santa Barbara involved, et cetera. So again, but this we speak to, and again, my experience has been when students hear about it, whatever level, from middle school up, they get it, and they want to know how they can become involved. So the key is getting the word out. And again, and I would say probably everybody on the panel, if you want to connect with us, I always say have talk, we'll travel. I'm happy to talk anywhere. I happen to live in Ojai, so I'm very close to your Santa Barbara and the like. So, but yeah, but Los Angeles to San Diego to the Mexican border, it's all easy for me, so yeah.
Vicky, would you like to take or?
I have something really general and basic to say. So when I told people that I want to study in America or that I'm going to go to a traveling high school, they thought I was crazy. And they told me that maybe you should just stay in your hometown, maybe you should really reconsider. So I would say these comments, sometimes they did make me feel that maybe as Kenneth said, maybe I shouldn't be in the room where it happens, where it matters. Maybe my voice doesn't matter as much as I think that it does. Maybe I'm not smart enough. Maybe I don't have enough money and so on. I would say if there's a person, a young person in your life, and they have really, really big dreams and goals, and even if you think that, maybe they should really lower their dreams a little bit. Maybe instead of that, tell them, encourage them, tell them, you know what, I can help you in this way, or, oh, I can connect you with this person. I feel just encouraging young people would be a really great start. Yeah, as a young person myself. Yeah.
Thank you so much. So next question. Okay. Could you please? Yes.
Hi, thank you. Adrienne Davis. I have a question for Viktoria Lokh. I wonder, as soon as I heard your story briefly, I wondered if you'd gone back to Estonia, not necessarily to your hometown to step into a stereotypical quagmire, but broadly speaking, gone back with your experience and found out how they responded to you. Thank you.
Found out how you responded to me?
Yeah.
Can I- the last?
You took a voyage and you come back with all these experiences, and how did it affect you and conceivably them, whoever you spoke to, privately or publicly?
Yeah, I think everyone that I used to talk to almost every day has become more distant from me. And I think I have a lot of new ideas and new perspectives which might not fit their daily lifestyle. But one thing that, while I was in my high school, that I helped doing was that I was like in Estonian Youth Council. So I was helping them like look over policy stuff, and I think I brought in new perspectives from like traveling. And also, you guys know Erasmus Plus. It's like an organization that funds projects for the youth. We also like wrote a project for that, and we organized like weekly cultural cafes where we brought in people from either different cultures or children, like teenagers who had a really specific interest for a culture, and then we kind of all got together with like 20 people, and we ate the food, and like we watched movies, and we tried to learn the language and so on. So we got like about like 6,000 euros for that, I think, and we brought that to my hometown, which my hometown has like 3,000 people, so it's really small. Yeah, there's like nothing to do there. Yeah, and also on my island, we don't even have a university. So I would have had to move from home anyways, I would say. Yeah, but I did go back. Yeah, I went to study abroad last semester. So I went back in September and in December. And then also, I'm actually going back in May. So if anyone's going to be in Estonia in May, then let me know. Yeah. Is that kind of answer? Is close? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Marisa?
Thank you. Just a couple of things. Firstly, on the issue of nuclear weapons and climate nexus, I think it's really helpful to expand that to environment nexus, because we have a biodiversity crisis as well, which often gets forgotten about. And one of the things we're doing at ICANN is we've got a poster. I don't know if anyone can see that. We've got a poster. My sister is a wildlife photographer. There's a couple of baby kangaroos on the beach in Western Australia, and we have a poster that says every species will be harmed in a nuclear war. Only one species can stop it. And an asterisk, it's not the kangaroos. And I think that's really, given the there are a lot of people in the world who care about animals very deeply, and plants as well. And so it's a way of broadening our audience by talking about those things that they care about as well. And I found that to be very powerful. And the second point was, Anduin, you also mentioned about divestment. And we have a divestment campaign at ICANN. And basically we encourage everybody to talk to their banks, to their local governments, to their universities, pension funds, and ask them about their ethical investment policies and demand that they divest from nuclear weapons. And NICAN, which is the New York campaign against nuclear weapons, they went to the New York Council and got them to pass a resolution to say that they would withdraw any investments from nuclear weapons. huge. So that brings me on to the cities campaign. Any of you can go to your local governments and say, are you part of the ICANN Cities Appeal, which is in basically for nuclear armed and nuclear allied states. Major cities have, hundreds of major cities around the world have signed up to the ICANN Cities Appeal supporting the TPNW, which is really annoying to the nuclear armed states particularly. You've got Washington DC, New York, you've got Paris and Berlin and Rome, all saying they support the TPNW. And that's a way to get involvement at a more local level. And politicians, talk to your elected representatives. As a former politician myself, I can say it matters when citizens go to see their local MP and say, we care about this, and what's more, we want you to do this. You've always got to go to them with a recommendation, an action you want them to take. And if you have to write it for them, then you do that too. But whatever you can do to make their life easier, and it will be appreciated and will make it more likely that they'll act on it. So I just wanted to add that it's a way of everyone can take some action, no matter how small, just whatever it is that feels comfortable to you, whether it's just talking to someone else about the issues, encouraging young people to get involved. And there is a Youth for TPNW group as well, which young people are encouraged to be part of. And so thank you so much to all the panel for your fantastic.
Yes, Ivana.
Just in case you didn't take careful notes, while Melissa was speaking, we do have a pamphlet that says what you can do. And it lists some of the things that have been mentioned, and it's just a good resource. So take even more copies and give them to friends or neighbors. It really, I just want to underscore what Melissa said. Every action matters. And many of us think of this as pushing until the dam breaks. And it's gonna break. It's just that it's not gonna break if we don't push, but if we keep pushing, it's going to break. And it will be like what Elaine White was talking about this morning. You know, there was a time when the abolition of slavery was unthinkable, when the end of apartheid was unthinkable, when the end of the Cold War was unthinkable. And all those things happen, and we can make this one happen as well.
So we are going to take last question. So yes, thank you.
Well, I want to say that I find the discussion by the young people very, very inspiring, and discussion by the contribution of the people who are young at heart, but a little older in body also, very inspiring. When I started teaching at American University back in the late 80s, the big issue with my students was nuclear war. And there were anti-nuclear groups that I was the advisor to. And then when the Cold War ended, the young people focused on other things, good things, climate change, racism, gender issues, but they lost sight of the danger threat posed by nuclear war. But that's coming back again. And I saw the reaction to the movie Oppenheimer, which might be terrible when it comes to ignoring the victims of the nuclear testing, and also when it comes to the issues of decision to drop the bomb. I mean, Nolan totally blew that. But in other ways, it's a very strong anti-nuclear movie. But there's been a lot of discussion the last 2 days about nuclear deterrence, which Marissa said, I think, is the ultimate form of terrorism. But I just wanted to say something about nuclear deterrence. Jack Kennedy got it. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, when the Joint Chiefs of Staff were all pushing him to invade Cuba and bomb the missile sites, Kennedy came out of the room and said, if we listen to those brass hats, there'll be nobody left alive tomorrow to tell them that they were wrong. And that's the thing. But I wanted to, my favorite comment on deterrence theory comes from a strange place. Since we have Australians here, and great film directors, I wanted to cite a movie from 1959 that the students probably don't remember, but some of us do, and that was On the Beach. And it's about the world ending as a result of a nuclear war, and the last pocket of humanity is in Melbourne, Australia. That's the southernmost major city, and they're waiting for the fallout to hit them. But the thing that's so ironic about this movie is that the scientist who has the wisdom is played by Fred Astaire. And we all know Fred Astaire as the song and dance man from the Ginger Rogers from the 1930s. But they're on the submarine, and they ask him, how did this happen? And he says, I want to read a little bit. He says, the war started when people accepted the idiotic principle that peace could be maintained by arranging to defend themselves with weapons they couldn't possibly use without committing suicide. Everybody had an atomic bomb and counter bombs and counter bombs. The devices outgrew us. We couldn't control them. I know, I helped build them, God help me. Somewhere some poor bloke probably looked at a radar screen and thought he saw something, knew that he hesitated, one thousandth of a second, his own country would be wiped out off the map, so he pushed the button, and the world went crazy, and now they're waiting for the last people to die. So, it's not an unexpected source, but there was some real insight into the madness that we've created, and that we have to, especially with the help of the young people, eliminate finally once and for all.
Thank you so much. So now time is up. So finally, lastly, we would like to have final remarks from each panelist. So my question is that what is your hope in continuing our efforts to achieve a world free from nuclear weapons? Yeah, starting from Dr. Dutch.
Well, my hope is that we can continue to grow this movement in a mass form, go viral, again, with young people like this. It is my role to engage them, to empower them, and to mentor them, and to turn the reins over to them. Because it is their world. We're old. They actually care about their future things. And so my helping, our helping, again, I think the opportunity is wonderful. So.
I'm hopeful because I do see the connections being made between all the different crises that we're facing. I see them being made, and I see the movement growing, and I see more young people getting engaged, and I see it in popular culture more, and I think we're going to hit that point soon, that moment of mass momentum. I think we're going to hit it soon.
I'm hopeful that the topic of nuclear weapons are being discussed more among the youth, even among my friends, which is largely in part due to, at first, the movie Oppenheimer, but also now with the growing risk of the nuclear threat in the world as we know it. And as wars and tensions increase, this topic is something that becomes more visible. But this also means that the disarmament movement is also more visible. So that's my hope, is that this movement grows, especially among my generation. Thank you.
I'm hopeful because I've seen the people around me change, their values, their perspectives, and it is already our third year of organizing nuclear politics with the Soka Institute for Global Solutions, and we keep growing and growing. Our network is getting out of hand. I'm speaking here today because of our institute, and I feel like we're gonna make a difference. I think the people that have been in our program have continued working towards achieving peace. And I think we had like 5 people at the 3 MSB this year from our program, which is a really big number considering that we only had like, how many did we have participants? 27, thank you, Tetsushi. Yeah, so 5 out of 27 went to 3 MSP this year. And I'm hoping to see more. Yeah, thank you.
Concludes our last session. Please give them a big applause once again. Thank you.
I just have to tell you that I feel like I have been bowled over. All of my hopes and dreams for this conference have really not just come true, but been completely exceeded. And so I just really want to thank these wonderful panelists who give us so much hope, and everybody else who has participated, and all of you who have stayed with us for nearly 2 days and 10 plus hours. We are going to have videos. We're going to have more information about what happened here for the outside world, so the impact will really go far beyond this room. And I really just have to thank our dear friends and partners at Soka Gakkai International. This conference quite simply wouldn't have been possible without them. And for that, I'm so truly grateful. And I'm not a religious person, but I will tell you that I really do believe that David Krieger and Daisaku Ikeda were here with us today, and that they just could not be more proud that we continue to carry their torch, that we continue to follow the path that they blazed for us. The path is clear, the end goal is clear, and we have to get there, and we're gonna get there with the help of everyone in this room and so many more people who believe that a world free of nuclear weapons is not just necessary, it is also possible. Thank you all so very much.